Time now for the big hot seat interview of the week. I've got, as I just mentioned, really looking forward to talking here. Blake Corbet is the head of technology, healthcare, investment banking, PI Financial. Blake, thanks for finding time with us.
Good morning, Mike.
You've been doing a ton of work on, the entire tech sector, healthcare changes, et cetera, but you've been writing a lot of stuff recently on self-driving cars, and that's one of the technological revolutionary changes that I've been talking about for several years. And now it seems like with Uber testing out self-driving taxis in Pittsburgh, I think it is, and we've got self-driving buses and cars being tested out in Singapore. I mean, it feels like we're nearly there.
You know, it does. You're right. It is upon us. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves. In everyday driving, most people don't actually, get to use a self-driving car. But there are a lot of features that are being introduced and have been introduced and are being used on existing cars right now that are the first step towards a fully self-driving car. And those are, helpful features like, first we had blind spot indicators. Now we have the car buzzing or pinging to tell us if we're too close to the edge of a lane, if we're starting to weave. The cars now will stop if you're backing into an object that you can't see. The cars will automatically apply the brakes, do the same thing going forward. In an emergency, in an accident, the same way that the computer in the car decides that the airbags need to be deployed, they can use that technology to apply the brakes to prevent the car from hitting an object. A lot of these things are being baked into cars to make them safer, and that's ultimately the goal.
By the way, every one of those things you just detailed, I think they have me in mind with those. I consider myself one of the world's worst driving in reverse drivers going at this point. So, God, it was a godsend when they introduced that camera. And then they go, they'll stop anyways when I'm an idiot and don't see the obstacle. So, yes, they've got my name on those things. What about, I just mentioned that Uber's testing out in Pittsburgh right now. I think it's new to me. It's like autonomy, but they go new to me or something in Singapore. They're doing it. And Tesla, though, has got a lot of, right now, a lot of publicity over their Autopilot.
Yeah, indeed. I have personal experience with Tesla's Autopilot, and I've regularly described it as it's about as good as a nervous teenager, Autopilot. It's not good in every circumstance. I find it's generally very good on the highway. Not so much the Whistler Highway, which has got a lot of bends and curves in it. It can handle those at a fairly low speed. But, the I-5 or any fairly straight or wide curve highway, it works brilliantly. It has the car keeps itself in the lane, and it has adaptive cruise control, so it'll keep itself at a certain speed, maintaining a distance from the car in front. So if the car in front of me slows down, it'll slow me right down. I was coming back from Seattle and stuck in I-5 traffic, right down to a dead stop, and I didn't have to touch anything. My car pulled up right in front, right behind the car in front of me, and then as the car pulled away, we would go back up to speed. So highway driving, great. And the other way it works really well is in bumper-to-bumper traffic, where you can get distracted. Subaru's got a new feature now where if you're, for example, you're pulling right and you're behind another car and you're turning right on into traffic, the car ahead of you goes. You look left to make sure that you're pulling it. You're not pulling into traffic in front of a car, but a car in front of you stopped. You can end up hitting them in the back. They've got a feature that'll prevent that. So little things like that are making the little fender benders and the big accidents safer. But in bumper-to-bumper traffic and in highway driving, that Tesla Autopilot works very well. You just got to avoid watching a Harry Potter movie while you're doing it.
Blake, by the way, of course, is head of technology and healthcare investments, so he advises companies, in those fields. And I'm going to ask him specifics, if he can give us some of the stocks that he's got his eye on that he thinks that you should put on your radar in just a minute. But I want to just go a little bit further here. The implications are profound, though. I talked, and I'm not at liberty to say which really big insurance company asked me in to chat with them, and really talking about there's not going to be auto insurance as we know it, whether that's 7 years out or 10 years out, I don't know, but just because these cars will be so much safer.
It's true. I actually wrote a little piece on this 6 or 8 months ago. I agree. I think insurance will change immensely. The auto insurance industry is very sophisticated. There's so many data points and so many accidents and so much money involved and a whole economy around it that it's become a very sophisticated business. And the real driver at the end of the day for the push for autonomous vehicles is to eliminate human error, because humans are just terrible drivers. We're all terrible drivers, and computers eventually will get better than us. And I think I read that there were something like 35,000 accidents, or 35,000 people died last year in 2015, and something like 80% of those accidents were attributed to human error. If we can reduce or eliminate that, that's a noble goal. But when it comes to insurance, there are big industries that will be affected by this, and insurance is one of them. It looked to me like Google and Volvo and some of the leaders in the autonomous vehicle space they made an announcement in order for people to be less concerned about what the legal implications are and the insurance implications are of an autonomous vehicle in an accident. Google announced that they would self-insure all the cars that they put on the road. They're in the best position to do that because they have the data, they know what the cars are capable of, and they know when they're safe. And so, that's really going to change who insures cars and what it costs for insurance.
We're just touching on some subjects here because I want to get to some investment ideas, but I got to throw one in. I was very critical when Vancouver, people listening in Calgary and Edmonton, et cetera, might recall that Vancouver had a big transit referendum, whatever it was, 2 years ago. I was really critical, and I thought it was typical of government that they didn't even anticipate, because they're talking about a 10 and 20-year plan here. They didn't even anticipate the changes that will take place. Certainly in 10 years, we're going to have a lot of driverless cars. A lot of people aren't going to bother owning cars anymore. They're just going to call on, a driverless car, driverless taxi. Those are coming. And they didn't even anticipate and incorporate that into their city planning. And I thought that was ridiculous, and I thought it actually was a terrible reflection on the caliber of thinking going on there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a big misstep because as you walk forward and think about what's going to happen, the sharing economy, and we're seeing it with Uber in Pittsburgh, as you said, and in Singapore with the other sharing company, but also with changes to city planning. You're right. When people can draw a car on demand, it's going to change everything about transportation. That car that you call around to the front of your house and you get into, or let's say you're in an apartment building, you get out at the front. So the apartment building will have a big sweeping driveway now and have space set aside for that. And you get out of the car and the car will go park itself. And the garage will probably have a rule that says nobody's allowed to drive their car in there because, you're going to end up opening doors and dinging other cars. Mm-hmm. It's much safer if it's all, run by computers. Streets will have, where we have bike lanes, you'll have, or we could have, if we were thinking forward enough, lanes that were just, and routes that were just for autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, it's just absolutely, and I'll finish with this before we get to the other side. This may be the best news for healthcare that it's had in a long time. We have an unsustainable model at this point, but self-driving vehicles, when they're incorporated en masse, could be huge in terms of, emergency rooms will not have to deal with those emergency room accidents. And so I just pointing out that the implications socially are going to be huge.
I agree. It'll take a long time to get to the fully autonomous utopian vision, but the early stages are these aids and helpful layers of technology that will reduce or eliminate the accidents and the injuries, and that stuff comes first, and that's the best part.
I think, just so you know, Blake, that I think I'll be successful crowdfunding for my first self-driving vehicle just in the name of safety for people. At any rate, Blake Corbet is with me, Head of Technology, Healthcare Investment Banking at PI Financial. I'll come back. I'm going to ask him what's on his radar list. What are his must-own stocks? Stay with us right here on the Money Talks Network. I've got a truly shocking stat plan for you just in a couple of minutes' time. I've got Ozzie Jurek, I've got Victor Adair, and I've got two goofies for you. All of that coming up on Money Talks. But right now, having a fascinating conversation with Blake Corbet. Blake, this is always the type of thing I wish I had like 9 hours on the air, because I think this is essential knowledge for people. And we just talked about changes to city planning. That's just one example of how if you don't know this stuff, you're missing the future. You may be missing a job too, by the way. You may be missing lots of other things, but the thing I want to focus on is missing investment opportunities here. And obviously it's a broad thing when you're looking at healthcare investment, technology, et cetera. But I was hoping you could sort of narrow it down, just maybe give us 2-3 examples of what you look at.
Sure. Well, let's start with technology. There's a company, actually it's Vancouver-based, interestingly. It's a company called TO Networks. They've got a long track record of great execution with the same management team, reducing costs, delivering organic growth. They've made 3 very successful acquisitions, 2 very large ones and 1 little tuck-in that's added to that organic growth. And they kind of focus on a niche sector, which is a niche of 60 million people in the U.S., but it's the underbanked. So this is a company that does bill payment mostly and a little bit of money transfer for people that need what's called an expedited bill payment. So they need to make their electricity payment or their gas payment today, otherwise it gets cut off tomorrow. And so they need to make that payment in cash. And the way they would do it is through TO Networks system. With their customers, TO Networks customers are like PG&E, which is Pacific Gas and Electric, Memphis Light and Power, long list of Duke Power, big utilities in the U.S. You'd either go to a kiosk in there near their office, or to a Circle K or a MoneyGram location. There's a total of 69,000 locations in the U.S. that you can access this, make a payment, and the difference is TO's connected right into their back office. It takes a long time to get that connection with that company, but once you've got it, then TO can post a payment. And it's not like when we make a payment, with CIBC or something like that. You make the payment on your online banking and it posts like 3 days later. This gets done right away.
What's the symbol for TO Networks?
The symbol is TNC, so Tiger, November, Charlie. It's a company with about 180 million market cap. I said it's based in Vancouver, but the vast majority, in fact, all of their revenues are in the U.S. in U.S. dollars. Most of their costs, except for some head office costs, are all in U.S. dollars. So it's a good place to be for Canadian investors. The way I see the Canadian dollar dropping and the U.S. dollar rising, especially if rates move in the U.S., you want to own U.S. assets and you want to own Canadian assets that have U.S. revenues, because that's just going to improve their margins.
And sorry to go all Barbara Walters on you. Give me another one.
Okay, another one. Well, just sticking with that, owning a company that has a Canadian listing, so it's easy to access and it has U.S. revenues in the healthcare space. There's another company that I like very much called Nobilis Healthcare. Nobilis Health Corp the ticker is NHC on the Toronto Stock Exchange. This company is about 300 million market cap. It is listed in Canada, but its operations are all in the U.S., in fact, down in Texas and Arizona. And they have basically, quite simply, what they do is they operate what are called ASCs, clinics and small hospitals. So not unlike the Falls Creek surgical clinic where you go in for day surgeries, they do that. They operate a number of clinics, 9 in fact, that are some are small hospitals and some are just large clinics in Dallas, Houston, and Phoenix. They focus on elective procedures only that address back pain, nerve decompression, bariatric, that sort of stuff. Very specific reimbursements from insurance companies. And what they do is there are a number of companies and a few public companies that do this sort of thing and own like a network of these clinics. But what Nobilis does that's different is they have a unique approach to marketing. So they focus on a very specific set of elective procedures, mostly back pain, and they market those and they deliver doctors. They bring in patients from all over the U.S. down into their centers in Dallas, Houston, and Phoenix for the procedures. That's what sets them apart from others. They drive their revenue and they control it by the marketing spend. The company has been very good with acquisitions and has very, very strong operational results.
I just have to give it a personal endorsement in this way. Man, if you are in the back pain business, that is a growth industry, I'll tell you.
It certainly is.
From personal experience, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We got time for one more if you've got one for us.
I got one more. I'll give you another kind of slower-paced name, a name that I like. I own all 3 of these, and I like them. Another Vancouver-based company called Diversified Royalty Corp. This is about a $270 million market cap company. They pay a fat 9+% dividend paid quarterly. I actually put it on the dividend reinvestment program, so I just accumulate more stock. What they do is they are a very sophisticated management team that approaches large, usually private companies, and buys from them a royalty stream. So they pay some money up front, and they receive a stream of payments based on revenue. And the question kind of comes, well, is this a big business, and why do they do this? It is a big business because a lot of private companies, large, great companies, need or don't want to take on, they don't want to issue equity, and they don't want to take on more debt. So this royalty kind of sits in between, and it's a very predictable stream of cash flow for the shareholders of Diversified Royalty. Great dividends, and a good example of what they do is, we all know I've heard of Mr. Lube. Mr. Lube's a big private company in Canada, very, very successful, but you can't invest in it because it's a private company. Well, Diversified Royalty's largest royalty is with Mr. Lube, and it's a way for Canadian investors to get a play on that.
Just fascinating stuff, and this is one of those like little. Don't want to put you on the spot, but I'd love to have you come back, Blake, and talk, and we'll focus on the healthcare side of stuff that you do. I mean, I know it's hardly big, insightful of me, but I mean, I just see the phenomenal growth that seems to be recession resistant, in healthcare.
Absolutely, I'd be delighted. I mean, just a comment on that space. I've seen in Canada, there's a lot of biotech companies that can be quite exciting, and I tend to focus more on services and a little sector called specialty pharma, which is, companies that own a drug and derive cash flow from it. Easier to forecast, to own, and to predict.
I've always been keen on the services side of a growth industry. Blake, thank you so much for finding time for us. I've loved it.
Anytime, Mike. Thanks.